Well, good morning. How's everybody doing this morning? My name's Scott McCarty. Like Jason said, thanks for the intro. Appreciate it. And Julie, you may want to introduce yourself as well, but it certainly feels good to put some real clothes on here and get out from behind the Zoom camera. So, the Braves are in the World Series for the first time since 1999. So excited about that. Stole one from Houston, right? Go Braves! But no, really happy to have Julie with me as well, and she's kind of my partner in crime for our Southeast Life Sciences team, covering the majority of the Southeast. So you want to introduce yourself quickly?
Julie Ebert, and I'm essentially just north of Scott, so I do Virginia, Maryland, D.C., Tennessee area. So we're the same person, just cover a different region.
For sure. Well, great. Well, we're really excited to walk you through our healthcare investments and exit data this morning. And just wanted to show and start first with the owners and kind of the brain power of our data. And so we put this together on a semi-annual basis. So don't feel like you have to take crazy notes this morning because we got a ton of content here. I'm going to be kind of reading some of this because it's hard to memorize all this. But it's on our site as well, so you can grab it there too. So our discussion this morning will be focused mostly over the past 6 quarters. So 2020 and the first half of 2021 trends. This is mostly national and global data, but we'll take a look and see how a few of the trends kind of line up with the Southeast. And then this afternoon at the investor lunch and the investor panel, they can agree or disagree with what we found. All right, so let's get into this. So I know we're starting to sound a little bit like a broken record here, and it's never easy to raise capital as an entrepreneur, but it continues to be a very good time to be in healthcare innovation. So VC healthcare fundraising has already crushed 2020's full year record at the halfway point of 21, raising nearly $22 billion, as you can see on the slide, just completely going up into the right here. That's 30% more than the full year record of 2020. So rapid response to the pandemic is definitely driving some of this. PE and hedge funds are coming downstream into venture, and they're standing up private funds. And compounding the numbers, venture's creating opportunity funds to double down on some of their existing portfolio companies that are just killing it right now. So what you'll also see is large valuation step-ups in private financing, high-valued IPOs. Strong aftermarket performance is driving this larger fund creation that we're seeing. And now fundraising cycles, which used to be kind of 7 to 10 years, right, in an average venture fund, are averaging 2.5 years now, and sometimes even more quickly. So it continues to accelerate. So on the fund side, as you can see, Flagship, Arch, OrbiMed, a few examples on the national side. They've raised $1 billion plus funds in the first half of this year. So they're going to need to go out and figure out a way to deploy that capital, right? And the hedge funds getting into the game, like Tiger Global, Perceptive's Ontogeny, and the Rise Fund, all closed private funds, fully or partly allocated to venture healthcare. So some funds raising new funds to focus on specific subsectors like Column Group for neuro, or for early stage specific deals like Versant Voyagers, mostly for incubated ideas and kind of companies that are just getting out of the gate. So this investment into the actual companies is obviously going to follow suit, right? And with all this capital creation, we'll get into that in the next few slides. So I'll cover biopharma and diagnostics, and my resident health tech and device pro over here will cover those sectors, and we'll also cover some exit trends quickly, and hopefully we'll leave time for a little bit of questions. All right, so let's dig in here to this fundraising and how it's currently being deployed. So these quarterly trends are crazy. We're certainly seeing some strong tailwinds from healthcare's response to the pandemic, with 2020's record numbers highlighted at $15 billion raise in Q3 2020. This did not slow down this year. As you can see, was driven by accelerated adoption of health tech solutions, new care delivery models, and strong interest in emerging biopharma tech. As you can see in the blue and the green bars here, is certainly driving a lot of this. So as you get into this year, it's just crazy, right? So at Q1 21 exploded to another record of $23.4 billion, and that crushed the prior record by 56%. And Q2 continued, right? And it was also to another record-breaking $23.9 billion. This is more than double the first half 2020 pace, and already close to the first year record. So on the health tech side, that showed the largest increase with the first half breaking 2020's full year investment. And biopharma sees significant growth punctuated by mega-sized mezzanine financings led by crossover investors, which the interesting thing about these mezzanine rounds, we really see that as a healthy sign for continued active pipeline of good IPO candidates. and believe that that window will remain open, but I guess it's to be determined. Both also far ahead of 2020's pace, and interestingly driven a bit by the spike in European investment is on the DX and tools side. And then so just looking quickly at the Southeast, it's been a nice contributor to these numbers, as you can see in the yellow box, garnering about $3 billion in venture dollars over the past year and a half through 172 deals. And health tech, as we all know in the Southeast, is really the leader in our market, continues to be both in number of deals and total fundings, with 68 deals worth $1.5 billion in transaction volume. And biopharma follows closely behind here with $751 million over 46 venture-backed companies. And then device with 30 deals, nearly $500 million in fundings in the Southeast. And diagnostics tools is last, but closely behind, right? And a little bit less transaction volume, 28 deals and $287 million in total deal volume. So let's take a quick look at each sector here and see if we can pull out some national trends and how that lines up with the Southeast venture activity. So on the national side, Series A biopharma activity in general is the first thing that jumps off the page. These are always, on the biopharma side, obviously raising the largest slugs of capital here. So the first half of 21 doubled the first half of 2020 dollars and almost matched full year 2020 activity with huge platform deals from Treeline Biosciences, Cantessa, Amplify Bio, Icon, making up $1.3 billion in just those 4 deals. And also significant oncology activity continues, which is certainly not surprising. Also, these investors seem to be cooling to orphan rare disease opportunities as these deals in numbers and dollars continue to decline. Anti-infectives are up significantly, and that's to be expected, right, with COVID and the pandemic. With the tailwinds coming from there, as 4 of the 5 top deals in the sector are focused directly on COVID. And interestingly, some of our data also includes Europe. Interestingly, 3 of those on the COVID side are in Europe. And we're seeing pre-money valuations continue to climb as well, up 63% in sub $15 million deals, and even more, 65% increase in larger Series A of 15 million plus. So how does that line up with what's going on in the Southeast, right? Interestingly, kind of breaking from the national trends in the Southeast, ophthalmology, we've always had a nice concentration of ophthalmic innovation, ophthalmic technology in the Southeast. And that continues here with 5 Series A financings, the most active sector in terms of deals, and $85 million in volume, which is 28% of the total. And that's highlighted by our friend Pat Richels at Cena Therapeutics in Durham that raised $55 million Series A last December. So oncology is now kind of aligning a little bit more with the national view, is also very active, 3 Series A financings over the last year and a half. But the 2 largest financings, Coimmune and Inceptor Bio, was $45 million and $25 million respectively, and that was 23% of the total Series A money in the region. On orphan rare, this is also kind of breaking from the national trends. Orphan and rare disease, we're not really seeing the decline down south, with 3 strong Series A financings led by Hemoshear in Charlottesville, Virginia, in Julie's territory, raising over a $40 million Series A. So platform is not as active in Series A in the south over the past 6 quarters, only 2 deals worth less than 10% of the total. So found that interesting as well. So just quickly expanding our view into later stage biopharma deals in dollars, the trends line up with Series A national trends pretty closely. So oncology, platform, anti-infectives, all hot. Anti-infectives in particular, continuing the COVID tailwind argument, saw 9 $50 million financings and 2 companies at $1 billion plus post-money values. In the first half of 21, we saw 83 LiPo deals, and LiPo is likely the IPO, so these are kind of our mezzanine type financings. We see that as a signal that we track around investors believing the IPO window will stay open. So average pre-money of these crossover mezz rounds was $232 million, with an average round size of $118 million. And 14 of these deals closed a crossover and went public, all in the first half of 21. So interestingly, a lot of them were fairly early, right? 9 of those were still preclinical stage at IPO. Well, we're seeing 1.8x step-ups from private round to IPO and 33% post-market performance. And the medium time to IPO from Series A is only 2.1 years. That's really quick. Some stars in this category are Tessera, Atai, and Prime Medicine, all with 13x step-ups down to almost 5x step-ups in that stage. And so while the Southeast has not quite seen that level of biopharma IPO activity recently, we do have some really nice later stage deals that could lead to IPO activity in the near future. So Stride Bio in Durham is a great example of that, raised $82 million in a Series B this spring, which had crossover support. And Antios Therapeutics out of Emory, technology came out of Emory, announced nearly $100 million Series B in April, but have moved to New Jersey recently, so we'll fall out of the Southeast numbers a bit. So here's just a quick snapshot of most active new biopharma investors over the past 6 quarters. Not a lot of Southeast representation here, which is not incredibly surprising, but our belief continues to be that capital finds good technologies, right? So no matter where it lives, and the world continues to get smaller, which has been accelerated a bit by the pandemic. So moving on to the diagnostics and tool side, again, we'll break it out by Series A and later stage. So Series A in diagnostics and tools is definitely active and on pace with the first half of last year. It's just not the explosive, record-breaking activity we're seeing in biopharma and health tech right now. We're seeing investors continue to pursue COVID-19 testing companies, which makes sense, but that has to be reaching, and we believe has to be reaching a saturation point here pretty soon. Anti-infectious was a big focus in 21, as was oncology, and continued into Q3 with an impressive Series A in Durham. Xylus raising $70 million in July of this year. Pre-money valuations were led by the R&D tools sector at an average of $17 million and an average deal size of $6 million. So looking at the Southeast and kind of seeing how that lines up, the Southeast saw 14 Series A fundings in the past year and a half, totaling $75 million, with 7 being on the tool side and 6 being on the testing side. Only 1 on the analytics side in the first half, but again, Xylus, the deal that got done in Durham, the $70 million Series A, almost equals the total Series A volume in diagnostics over the previous 6 quarters. So good to see these kind of financings getting done in our backyard for sure. And then on the later stage diagnostics and tool side, that investment pace increased, again sounding like a broken record in the first half of 21 and on pace for another record year. Tools dominated the scene here on the later stage in deals and dollars, as you can see on the bottom right of the slide. And late stage hedge fund and growth investors are getting into the game, such as Invis Group, Wellington Management, SoftBank, D1, Kasdan, and Marshall Wace are all kind of getting in the game, which is kind of a new thing for us to see. Diagnostics analytics saw $500 million plus deals get done in oncology, which led the way, followed by platform, genetic, and COVID testing deals. And tests had even more $100 million plus financings at 7, with a focus on anti-infectives, platform, premature births, sexually transmitted infections, and oncology. The highest valued diagnostics tools companies in the first half of 21 had a 2.1x step up in valuation from the prior year. And then looking at the Southeast, 13 later stage diagnostics tools financings averaging $15 million for a total of $196 million, highlighted by Metabolon, Babies, and BrainBox, all announcing $23 to $30 million raises. And the average post-money valuations were in the $70 million range, which is certainly still impressive, but significantly lower than the national average of $358 million. And then also just a quick look at diagnostics investors and these new investors that are active. Interesting to see North Pond team super active here. I don't know if we have anybody from North Pond with us this week, but relatively new fund based out of DC. We're also seeing tech investors cross over and popping into the diagnostics and tool space like 8VC and Andreessen and a number of others here on the chart. So Julie, I'll take a breath here. It's all yours to cover.
Okay, great.
Device.
Well, I'm going to address the health tech market, which we've all seen a lot of new activity here, and it's very interesting. And because it has, you can see up here, this year already we're almost at last year's numbers, just at mid-year. So a really robust market for health tech. And if you don't mind, maybe I'll start with just a couple of definitions, because SVB and our colleagues who make this report have come up with some good ways to kind of think about the sector more broadly. And a couple of categories you're going to hear me talk a lot about this morning are provider operations and alternative care, which make up, the highest percentage of these deals. Just to explain what those are, I'll give you a couple definitions. So provider operations to us are solutions that increase efficiency or accuracy of either provider to provider interactions or provider to patient interactions. So to give you an example there, a provider to provider interaction might be a Komodo Health, which gives physicians access to specialists and white papers that were written about very kind of narrow areas. So that's kind of an access thing. A provider to patient example might be HeartFlow, which helps, it's like AI that helps with diagnosis of cardiac conditions. So that's provider operations. And then the other really big category here is alternative care. And so this is actually delivering care in a setting outside of the acute care setting like the hospital or the private practice. So this includes telehealth. And so as you might expect with the pandemic, this has really been accelerated over the last 18 months. I was actually, my first trip post-COVID was to the health conference last week in Boston, and I listened to a panel where Brad Smith, who he had previously founded Aspire Health, which addresses chronic conditions, and just recently founded a value-based care company focused on the rural environment. But he's been quite successful. It's called Main Street Health. He said that he estimates that we've accelerated 10 years of progress into that last 18 months. So it really has pushed forward a lot of the technologies here and why you see so much activity in that alternative care space. Just to give a couple of examples of the top Series A rounds here for the provider operations, we saw Relife get financed. That was a $12 million deal. That's AI helping diagnose chronic conditions earlier. And Zentor, which is a medical image management company for neuro and cardiac. So these are some interesting fundings. We also saw clinical trial enablement, which is pretty self-explanatory here, but you can see at the bottom, this is with decentralization, due to the pandemic, there have been a lot of people trying to get clinical trials enrolled and get patients in there and also make sure they're just happening, that procedures are happening and that they can actually move them forward. Also fueled by all the biotech activity that Scott was talking about. There are a lot of companies out there with a lot of money with drugs in the clinic. Just to give you some averages of sizes of deals that are happening here, the Series A average round size was $7 million and pre-money valuation of $17 million. So obviously a little bit smaller than the biotech deals, but not unexpected. And then when we look to the Southeast to see how that compares, we see that the same bulk of activity happened in provider operations. So provider operations deals in the Southeast, we had 13 of them totaling $132 million. And that makes up more than half of the deal activity and actually over 70% of the dollars. So that's consistent with the national averages. We also had a fair amount of activity in wellness and education. So this is either some content that's provided or some of the weight loss stuff that you've seen that's more lifestyle. We also include some of the mental health, depending on what you're trying to do in mental health, is included in that wellness and education category. And what's interesting here is that the alternative care was not quite so high in the Southeast, so an anomaly, but it's probably just a timing difference. Moving to the next page, this is now moving into looking at later stage health tech deals. And now that health tech's been around a little bit longer, we've seen a lot of big deals happen. So just to draw your attention here to on the upper right, I don't know if this is up here in the top right up here, there was $19.4 billion done in later stage health tech deals. And that's almost 550 deals in the nation done in health tech. So tons of activity. And that exceeded last year, this is by mid-year this year, we were already 35% ahead of where we were in 2020. Again, same thing, provider operations and alternative care. I would say that in alternative care, when we look at the segments of alternative care where we see a lot of activity, that comprised about 43% of all the deals, so about $8.5 billion of the investment was in alternative care. And that's for stuff like mental health is a big one, women's health is a big one, and chronic care management. And this is trying to integrate tech into some of the services, integrate the home into some of the care paradigm to really reduce costs, keep people out of the acute care center, involve a little bit more preventative care, and look at comorbidities to take care of these patients to reduce costs and obviously result in better outcomes. Some of the trends that are influencing this is we're seeing lots of exits. So whereas we used to not have as many exits in health tech to refer to, investors are seeing those exits, and so they're like, okay, well, we can invest here and get our money back. So that's fueling some of the additional dollars going in here. And one of the other trends is large employers. We're seeing that large employers are providing additional digital benefits to their employees. And you see these alternative care companies catering to that. They're like, oh, they see a need and they're catering to that demographic. So those are fueling. One thing to look at here is also some of these mega deals that are happening. So we've got a lot of unicorns in health tech. So we wouldn't used to have this, but there were 28 deals in the first half of this year that had valuations north of $1 billion. And the average deal size was about $250 million. And we saw some big investors come in. Tiger Global, of those 12 deals, was in 7 of those 12 deals. We saw SoftBank in 2 of them, and we saw Bailey Gifford in a couple of them. So it's just interesting to see those big players come in. Looking at the Southeast, this is the most active place for investment in the first half of this year is in health tech in these later stage deals. So of all the deals we're talking about today, this sector is the most active.
By a huge margin. Yeah,
huge market. So there were 44 later stage health tech financings in the Southeast, comprising $1.3 billion in deal value over the last 6 quarters. Again, driven by alternative care. And just to give a couple of shout outs to some of the deals in the Southeast, we had 18 deals worth nearly $1 billion in alternative care alone. That was led by Ally Align in my home state of Virginia, which made the national tombstone page here. We also had Monogram Health out of Nashville, which is kidney care. That was backed by TPG in a $160 million deal. MD Live down in Florida. Mm-hmm. We also had a lot of activity in provider operations, 13 deals in the Southeast. Not the same deal values, which we're not surprised by. I mean, it actually is what attracts a lot of investors, is some of these valuations get super high, like on the coast and in the Northeast. We actually see some investors kind of retreating to the Southeast because the valuations are not quite so bonkers. And we had a fair number of clinical trial enablement deals, 5 nice later stage deals. One that we recognize from Atlanta is Florence, got an $80 million deal done. Yep. So nice to see that. And going to the next page, I think this investor page is actually one of the more interesting ones because we see some of the familiar faces that we've seen in healthcare for a long time, the Oaks, the Polaris, the General Catalyst, LRV. But the other ones we see is the tech investors coming in here. And in health tech for a long time, we saw the tech guys sit on the sidelines. And it was really, I think that there was some concern about like HIPAA and regulatory environments, and they just were like, how big is this going to be? And I think that a lot of them, have been dipping their toe in and have seen the success and have seen the values there. And so you see Google Ventures, you see Andreessen, you see 8VC, you see 406 Ventures. So they're getting involved. You also see different constituents in the healthcare system getting involved because they realize they need to help fix the system. So you're seeing the health systems get in. So you see here Unity Point Health, you see Kaiser, you see Providence Ventures. I mean, these are, professionalized investors, kind of making investments and putting things to work in their own systems. And then we also see the payers, which we're not surprised by. You see, Blue Ventures on here, Humana, Cigna, so we see a lot of activity there. So one thing I will comment on is we have a colleague, Steve Aguilar, who sits on the VC relationship management side and has been talking to a lot of these health systems. He has said that in the last couple of months, he started to see some of the health systems pulling back a little bit. And I think it's out of being overwhelmed by the number of options that are out there. And so these health systems are kind of saying, okay, we've made a couple of investments. We've instituted a couple of new tools in our health systems, but there are so many things we just need to kind of hunker down and try and fix what we've got now. So we'll see if that could, how that plays out, but it's something that he's noticed. And then last of all was the Tiger Globals and the like who are really driving valuations up in some of these later stage deals. They've got a lot of money to put to work. I mean, I just read Tiger Global raised another $8.8 billion 2 days ago, and they just raised 6 months ago. So there's a lot of money to put to work, which obviously results in high values. Shifting now to the med device world, there's a little bit of overlap with health tech these days as these lines start to blur. But one that we're really excited about, because I've spent a lot of time in med device over the years, is we actually see a reversing of trends here, and the med device market come back a little bit this year, in the first half of this year. So you can see where the totals there were declining, and the number of investments that happened, 86, like it kept going down in the US. It's now back up in the first half of this year, so it's nice to see that trend reversal. In terms of subsectors that are leading the way, non-invasive monitoring is where we've seen a bunch of deals with 14 deals in the first half of 2021 in that space, 8 of which are in cardiac monitoring. Neuroimaging is also another area where there's a lot of activity. And in the first half of this year, we'd already surpassed the number of deals that happened last year in that space. The focus there is on neurostim, as well as some brain-computer interface technology. Imaging deals, obviously, another focus here. Integrating AI and analytics there to help make that process of diagnosis a little bit more efficient. And then also surgical navigation is still a big area of focus. The median medtech deal size for Series A deals was $5 million, and that was on a median pre-money valuation of 10. So those are kind of familiar numbers there. Now let's look at the Southeast, see how we compare in the Southeast. There were 11 Series A device financings in the Southeast over the last 6 quarters, totaling $63 million, and the average deal size was $5 million. So we're in line with the national averages in terms of like how big the med device deals are in our space. And if you look at the bottom right here where we've highlighted some of the larger deals in the first half of this year, you'll see Rapid Pulse from the Southeast, which got a nice $50 million Series A done in the first half of this year, backed by Hatteras and Sante. Now shifting a little bit to some of the later stage device deals. The first half later stage deals are on pace to exceed 2020 also. There's been $4.6 billion invested in the first half of 2021 in some of these larger deals. And these are big deals. I mean, we had 7 financings that were over $100 million and another 14 that were between 50 and 100. So these are larger later stage device deals that are happening. We also note that there are a lot of new VC lead investors on Series B device deals, which, as you know, if any of you guys are med device companies, med device investors are scarce. And so it's nice to see some new investors coming in, especially on these later stage deals, because a lot of times it's like you weren't in there early, it's hard to attract some of the later stage investors further down the road. Robotic surgery, an area of interest, expensive obviously to develop. You can see a couple of the robotics companies in there. CVR Surgical, Care Syntax there. CVR Surgical saw the largest deal. They did a $600 million raise with a $3 billion post. So some big numbers posted in the med device sector. And the valuations were up for this area, fueled by the IPO performance, and we'll talk about exits in a few minutes so you can see some of the performance, but valuations are up more than 30% in the first half of 2021 versus 2020. And then looking at the Southeast, you can see in the yellow box here, there were 17 device deals got done in the Southeast, so pretty good, with an average deal size of about 22 million, which is a little bit lower. And some of the names that you'll recognize were Neosis, Active Implants, and Nodal Vision. So raised a fair amount of dollars in the Southeast in the med device space. And the next page, just looking to who the investors are. You'll recognize some of our Southeast fund friends, Hatteras, Questa, Vensana, Catalio Capital. So, and also, I don't know if you can see it, but this, under the venture capital column, there's tech angels. We see a lot of angel and high net worth continuing to finance some of the early stage investing in med device. It's like a lot of the corporate guys, and they won't want to get involved until a little bit later. And so it's interesting to see angels still play like an important role in getting, you know, some of these companies off the ground. So with that, I will pass it back to you, Scott, and you can talk about SPACs, because how could we not?
How can we not? How can we not? All right, great. Let's see here. Flip the slide. All right, great. So definitely good to see device and health tech kind of pair more with the national average versus biotech and diagnostics, but still great activity all around. But on the SPAC front, so 2020 saw SPAC activity become kind of cool again, right? Since 2020, there have been 36 announced de-SPAC transactions, what we refer to as de-SPAC, which means that the SPAC actually combined with the technology company, with the life science company, and they successfully got the transaction done. This was led by biopharma and health tech, which is not a surprise. So interestingly, kind of across the board, unlike the standard S1 IPO route that companies can take to go public, completed de-SPACs did not really do so hot post-transaction in terms of stock performance. You can see a lot of red on this slide under the de-SPAC kind of post-transaction performance. But you know, I guess only time will tell what happens over a longer period of time. But so far, not lining up with a standard IPO, great post-IPO performance that we're seeing. So we have at least one Southeast name here on the logos, Humacyte, that shows in progress but was successfully completed, and very low share redemption, which is a really good sign and something we see, so that when you enter into these transactions and the investors in the SPAC, right, who hold shares, they have the ability to redeem those shares over a period of time. And if they stay in the game, it certainly means that they like the transaction, and that's great to see. The other thing that we closely track on that is also you know, institutional investors, right, and see pipes coming alongside that transaction. And we love to see kind of the big institutional life science healthcare investors involved there. It gives a little bit more credence to that the transaction is going to get done. But Humacyte's doing fine. I mean, it's post-transaction performance on the stocks come down a little bit, but still hovering around that $1 billion or so market cap. So some nice capital to accelerate their biologic vascular technology, and we're certainly rooting for them. So moving now, we'll zip through this pretty quickly. We don't have a ton of time left, but moving through kind of the exit environment, right, and why all these funds have been raised at such a record pace, and deploying that capital is because the exit environment continues to be super healthy, right? So obviously, what's driving this crazy pace of investment in biopharma is the rich exit environment, especially through IPO. IPO activity was up the first half of this year, following a record 84 biopharma IPOs last year. So we did 50 in the first half of this year, and unfortunately, I don't have the data. We think that that's still going to be tracking to kind of hitting that 100 number this year, and still super active. And so that's you know, 12 IPOs with $1 billion plus market caps in the first half, with a couple of monster $4 billion plus deals in the mix here that's propelling the total market cap to be well ahead of 2020's pace that you can see on the slide. And that's contrasted a little bit, though, with IPO valuations in dollars dropping from last year's record numbers, and overall post-IPO performance was down. But we continue to see an increase in the likely to IPO, right, the big mezzanine financings. And that signals to us, like we talked about earlier, that window will remain, you know, robust with a strong pipeline. So hopefully we continue to see that. M&A down a bit, dominated by preclinical deals, averaging $305 million and 5.6x median upfront multiple on capital invested, which is still very healthy. So recent M&A in biopharma has been focused on early preclinical exits. I mean, 4 of 7 of these deals were preclinical and exiting even before they got the asset into the clinic. So that's super early. Upfront deal values continue to increase generally. It's pressured by rising valuations of mezz rounds leading to IPO is certainly kind of moderating that M&A activity. Exits for these companies are coming quickly, like we said, right? And large cap pharma is paying up. AskBio is a great example in our market in Durham. Bayer stepped up there with $2 billion upfront and $2 billion in milestones. So super excited for Sheila and team over at AskBio, and they're continuing their progress. So last biopharma slide, and this one's a little bit busy, but again, it's interesting to track IPO values, and when we compare the first half of this year to 2020 and even 2019, IPO values and proceeds are down, and post-IPO performance is down as well, as you can see in the chart on the bottom. Really, the only subsector that is really performing well is platform, which is still up 61%. So we'll continue to watch this and over time, but interesting stat. And I guess some of our questions are in this is that can these generalists and specialist public biotech investors not keep up, and are maybe some of these biotech companies going public a little too early, with 24 of 50 being preclinical or at phase 1 when they go public, which is just crazy. So it's really early in their development cycle. So we'll see how this continues to play out. And then on the DX and tools side, we're seeing strong activity in both M&A and IPO, already surpassing full year 2020. This is led by 10x Genomics, Castle on the tool side, and HotGen in DX testing. All had 300% plus post-IPO performance at mid-year 21. So that is impressive. And then on the private side, on the M&A side, they're on the rise in diagnostics tools as well. The new trend here is that recently public biopharma companies are snapping up R&D tools companies to broaden their own technologies and acquiring them at a pretty fast pace. Julie, you want to cover health tech?
Yeah, I will here. So IPOs in the first half of 2021 for the health tech space set a new yearly record. So you can see that it was more than $30 billion of value that came out of IPOs. It was really kind of interesting. So if you look at the bar charts here, the light blue is private M&A and the dark blue is IPO. And then on the right, the same colors follow. So you'll see even though there was a lot of private M&A, most of the value per the chart in the upper right actually came from the IPOs. So there were some big monster IPOs. And what I would just flag here, Doximity was north of 10 billion. Bright Health was north of 10 billion. And then we see some insurers come in there too with Oscar and Alignment Health, both at 4 billion. So those 4 deals alone comprise a lot of that 30 billion. So these are some really big valuations. And this doesn't include a couple of the SPAC deals that Scott mentioned. So Hims and Hers was a SPAC deal, as was Clover Health. So there's even more value and exit opportunity than just like the straight M&A and IPO here. What I would flag is that the post-IPO performance for the health tech companies has not been that great. And we've actually seen some of our clients on the health tech side who were looking towards an IPO, pumping the brakes a little bit, thinking about timing, not kind of putting everything on an IPO in the near term necessarily, just to kind of see how it plays out. And there was also an uptick in M&A. You can see that it's a slight uptick in the first half. There are already 9 M&A deals done. One notable one I'll mention is Iora Health being bought by One Medical for $2 billion. So that was a nice deal. And then moving to maybe some of the smaller private M&A deals and just to see how that splits out, you won't be surprised that, again, it's provider operations and alternative care where we see a lot of that activity. So in the first half of 2021, we saw 11 deals in the alternative care space, already ahead of 2020 numbers. Some of the notable deals in the alternative care space, you might recognize some of these names, were Accolade buying PlushCare for $450 million, Amedisys buying Contessa for $250. That's a Nashville company. And then on the provider ops side, Appriss Health bought Patient Ping. They just renamed actually a couple months ago to be Bamboo Health, and then Cedar buying Uda Health for $425. So some nice deals getting done in provider operations and alternative care. And really, the reason these M&A deals are happening is because the name of the game is, expanding your addressable market and kind of expanding your product and service offering. So that's what these health techs are doing, right? They're trying to add products, they're trying to add scale, they're trying to add reach, they're trying to add big customer contracts. So these acquisitions will, enhance their point solutions and give them more reach. And they all want the full stack, right? They want to take care of the patient from, across their whole patient journey from beginning to end. And so that's how you see people kind of filling in their product offering to have a comprehensive product solution. And then looking at med tech on the next page, med device. This is actually the best performing space. So when we look at post-IPO performance, the med device space has actually been really great. I mean, check out the bottom of that. Like, there's a lot of green across the bottom of how the med device companies have performed post-IPO, which is great to see. The ones that haven't performed as well tend to be just like the smaller cap companies. It just, there isn't the same sort of volumes there to support the share price. But the access to the public markets has been great. You can see that if you look at the upper right, it's kind of hard to see some of the colors, but essentially it was largely M&A where we saw med device companies exit historically. And there was really a dry spell on the IPO front that opened up in 2020 when med device companies could start to access the public markets again. And so you see the same is holding that we saw last year started in 2020. We're seeing it continue in 2021, which is great for the med device companies because they've got multiple paths and ways to exit. And it's pretty impressive, frankly, because we thought, when the whole pandemic started, the med device companies we saw impacted like immediately and right away because procedures weren't happening, clinical trials were stopping, anything that wasn't essential just stopped. So we were really happy to see the IPO market stay open here despite the disruption because of COVID in the med device sector. So we're hoping for the performance to continue for med device. And then I'll maybe talk about med device M&A on the next page. So the number of deals in 2021, we've already had 14 in the first half, is approaching the 2020 total. So still good activity on the M&A front. And that's brought on already $4.6 billion in value. So obviously still one of the main paths for exit. The largest upfront median deal value we've seen in a long time. So in the table on the bottom left, you can see the upfront median was over 200 million, which is the highest. We have back to 2015 here, but the deal sizes are up is the conclusion there. We saw some Boston Scientific, who had historically comprised like a ton of activity on the M&A market, who kind of sat out for a couple years digesting its big acquisition, re-entered the market after 18-month hiatus, and they acquired a number of companies, Preventus Solutions, Luminous, and then just earlier this month they announced another with Baylis. We also saw some smaller companies, public companies that had a singular focus start to get into the M&A activity and do some nice deals, buying some venture-backed companies. We saw NuVasive, Exonics, and C-Spine all get in on the action. And I think with that, Scott, we'll stop because I think we've hit people with a lot of data all before 9 a.m. And we'll see if anyone has any questions. We'll try and answer them, and if not, we can get back to you. Or we can leave it for the investors at noon to answer them.
Yeah, there you go. Happy to take any questions.
And like Scott said, this is available online. We put this report out twice a year, so it usually comes out kind of July time for mid-year, and then John Norris will put out the end of year one. He tries to do right before JP Morgan. So, yeah.
Can you just talk a little bit about the debt market, specifically the venture debt market that might be following some of these deals?
Yeah, well, you know that Scott and I spend a lot of time talking about debt. We have been, the availability in the equity markets has definitely, and the amount of dollars raised has definitely made it the appetite for venture debt by some of these companies. They're just not as eager to borrow more because they have their coffers are full. On the flip side, a lot of what we're talking to companies about and what we're lending into is companies wanting to use debt dollars to finance things like building out lab space or manufacturing, stuff that is, not as sexy as like the equity guys want their dollars going into things that are, having a direct impact on their ROI versus some of the kind of need to expenses that people want to spend dollars on. So it's still been, the amount of companies raising capital is good. you know, a rising tide lifts all ships. There are a lot of companies raising capital and they have needs. And so we're still super busy, but it has, the active equity markets has reduced the.
Yep. And to the capital point, right? And when you saw in the data that on the device side and on the health tech side, they're not raising quite as large amount of rounds for the most part, and especially in the Southeast. That's made our venture debt product and you know, the product in the market a lot more relevant, because folks do want to tack on, you know, 3-6 months in cash runway to make sure they hit those big milestones, right? Hit that value inflection pop before they have to go back out and raise the next large round of equity. So definitely we're seeing it on the biopharma side, where the debt's probably down a little bit, but maybe not quite as much on the sectors that you covered. So.
Well, yeah, and also I think that people have seen what a true disruption looks like. You know, a lot of times when we're saying, you know, one of the big qualities of venture debt is it just gives you a little more runway and cushion, that extra 3 to 6 months to get to that next milestone. When people used to say, well, what could happen? And I think we've all seen what can happen, you know what I mean? And no one's hoping for that, but it comes in all shapes and sizes, so.
Yep. Decent insurance policy. Thanks for the question. Tina?
So when's the perfect time for an IPO?
It's a really good question.
Well, I guess it depends on which sector you're looking at. I mean, I think, like I said, we still see a deep pipeline. There are a lot of companies waiting to go out. I think that there are med device still super healthy, and we haven't seen the dip. Biotech, the post performance hasn't been great. It's hard to kind of speak to timing exactly. I think they're always pushing people not to make it totally about timing. We'll see if a few more try and squeeze in this year before next year. There's usually a fair amount of activity in Q4. So.
Yep. And on the biopharma side, right, as they raise those what we're calling LIPO rounds, right, the likely to IPO rounds, and you get those big crossover investors, those big institutional investors in there that are also public biotech investors, there is going to be a window, right, where those companies are going to go public or they're not, right, and we're obviously seeing most of them go public. So once you raise that in biotech, once you raise that Series B and have successful, you know, institutional representation in there, and you're typically going public pretty soon after that, Tina. And that's why we've seen so much preclinical activity, early phase 1 activity going public, because they were able to garner those big crossover rounds and get out. So
we spent a lot of time guiding some of our clients who are eager to raise that big crossover round, because it's such a big slug of capital that you got to be really careful, though, because if you don't have the clinical results to back your ability to go public. I mean, the crossover investors have a lot of money, but they want results and they want them quick. And so it's not like a year later you go public. It's like, 3 to 6 months later, you know, you've got the filing ready when you're raising that crossover round so that you can go public right away. So I think the timing's tough. The timing's tough when you raise that money, because it's, the big checks come with strings for sure, and they want liquidity.
For sure. Well, looks like Jason's coming with a hook here, so
Yeah.
Thanks,
All right,
everybody.
thanks,
Really
guys.
appreciate it. We'll send this to everybody.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate Scott and Julie for the presentation. So we're going to go into pitch rounds now. The biopharma pitch rounds are going to be out the side here and directly behind me in the Palmetto Hall. And then the MedTech are just along this hallway here to the left, or depends on my right, your left. Thank you.